So let's take a look at WSM, Wireless Systems Manager from Sennheiser. So this isn't Sennheiser specific. Shure, for example, have a piece of software called Wireless Workbench. Does a similar thing, maybe does some extra things as well. We'll take a look at that on another occasion, but specifically now on WSM, because it's a piece of software we've got installed on the Venue Mac at Spirit Studios. So when you can get on in there, you can use this to get wireless control of handheld radio microphones on stage, of belt pack transmitters, say for guitar, bass on stage, and also for wireless in-ear systems being received to the artists on stage. So if you're a sole sound operator, individual, single, live sound engineer doing a gig in a small to medium venue like Spirit Studios, and you're over at front of house, wouldn't it be great if you had, it was possible to see battery level, for example, of these radio mics, if you could see audio AF, audio frequency, as in just level incoming into this handheld radio mic on stage. If you could see on the IMs, if you could see signal levels going into the stereo receiver. What about signal strength? It would be great if you could see antenna signal strength. So you could do some troubleshooting, either in sound check or hopefully not, but if you need to, even in the show. So take a look at the software, how to hook it up, and what its main uses are. So I'll take you through the gear that we've got first of all. Let's begin with the source. So we have a 4-way rack. So let's begin with the gear that we've got first of all. We've got a 4-way rack of Sennheiser G3. So this equipment isn't absolutely identical to what we've got in the Spirit Studios venue, but I'm so confident that if you understand the content of this video, you're going to be absolutely fine using the G4 equipment in the Spirit Studio venue. There's a lot of compatibility between G3 and G4 Sennheiser. Okay, so we have got this 4-way rack. Now, for this demonstration, we're only going to be using one channel. It's going to be this, what if we go in close, I've titled RX number 1 here. And it's on frequency preset 11.10. That's the mic I'm talking into, and that'll stay the same throughout this demonstration. So we'll go around the back and have a look in a moment, but what is going on here for the network setup is that there's an Ethernet connection out the back of this RX1, and in fact all of the RXs in that rack are connected to this switch. It's a Cisco 24-port switch. It doesn't have PoE, that's power over Ethernet. Doesn't need it. It's just a case of out the back of this rack are these Cat5 cables. They are connected into this switch, and then this black cable also into the switch is connected into our MacBook, which is running Sennheiser Wireless Systems Manager. Well, it's looking pretty busy around the back of this rack, but don't be intimidated. Here's what's going on. So if we head on in and look at the back of RX1, power is the yellow bit, and then after that, the orange bit is the Ethernet port. So we've got a Cat5 cable coming out that Ethernet port, and that is going into the switch. And then it's the same for each of the RX units in the back of this rack. The only difference is actually this particular RX unit is powered by its own power supply unit, PSU, and that's the yellow connection, whereas the other ones are actually powered by BNC from the ASA1, which is the antenna combiner splitter that's in the front of the rack. So this RX has actually got its own antenna plugged into it. That's the purple cable. So that antenna is an That antenna is an A2003 shark fin paddle, just a single one. That's what this mic's been received by. And that's the purple cable. In terms of the network setup, it's all the same. Each of the receivers in this rack have one of those orange ended RJ45 Ethernet Cat7 cables, and then we've got the audio coming out on an XLR. Just before we move on, just notice that the other RXs don't have one of those yellow power supplies going into them. They just have two BNCs going into them, an antenna 1 and an antenna 2. You can't quite see antenna 2 in this shot. It's just to the left behind where those rack slots are. You can just about make it out. It's a BNC in there. And actually, they're connected to the ASA1 antenna splitter combiner. They carry the power signal to run the unit as well as a signal being received from the shark fins or whatever remote antenna you're using. So here we are, the software. But first of all, connectivity. So go into System Preferences and Network. And the way I've got this addressed is that the computer is at 192.168.1.1. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. And that's really standard in terms of addressing for this little local area network that we've got going on here. Now the addressing of the RXs in the rack is simply 192.168.1.2 for RX number 1. That's the top left in the rack, and then the second RX along is 192.168.1.2, and then .3 for RX3 and .4 for RX4. So it's just the last number that's changing as we go through the rack. So this computer at 168.1.1 is how it is on this machine, but also so that's your basic setup. There are some variations of this which happen on busier networks, like what we've got at Spirit Studios in the venue, but if you're doing a basic setup on a job yourself, then that's probably the best place to start. So here's the software. There are several ways you may want to go about using this piece of software. Way number one is that you begin offline first of all. So if we go System and go into offline mode, if you go File and Open Configuration, on the desktop of the Mac in the venue there is a file that you can load, and then when you load that file up, you will get something that looks very similar to this. It is a preset. So I'm going to open that up again from the start like that, and we get a preset. Now if all of the handheld receivers, the RXs and the stereo transmitters, if they're all switched on and connected to the switch, they will appear when we go into online mode. Now actually at the moment I haven't got all of those devices plugged in, I've just got some of those devices plugged in. So I'm going to go into online mode. I'm going to go System and Online and get this preset doing something useful with the equipment that I've got plugged in. So I'm going to go two options. We can either send the information from the software to the rack. Don't want to do that because I have not got all of the pieces of equipment that were in this configuration that were saved switched on in the rack right now. So I just want to do it the other way and want to take the rack and have the software show the rack basically. So load device settings to WSM software, click that, wait a little bit, and actually that was really fast. So now we can see this handheld radio mic. As I speak there's level bouncing, it's 2/3 down on the battery, and this is the thing about the antenna, it's only got one antenna connected. That was the AS2003 shark fin that I showed you, and that's that antenna number 1 connection there. What's really useful about this antenna 1 and 2 connection is that you can see it move sometimes from one antenna to the other relative to where the artist is on stage, and you get a real sense of whether the placement you've chosen is good or otherwise. So this is called dual diversity, where we've got these two antenna that can be connected to an RX. As I say, in this case today, I've just got one connected, and it's showing me that it's the equipment is favouring antenna connection number 1. No surprise, since that's what the antenna's plugged into. Radio signal level, RF level, audio signal level. This is, in terms of sensitivity, set to -18 at the moment. It's not quite real time, but it's reasonably low latency, and it's a fair indicator in most situations. And then battery level. So we can rename. So if we click on any of these devices, we can call it something. We can do programming. So this first way of using WSM is simply open the configuration file, load information from the rack to the software to keep it up to date with how the rack is and what you've got switched on in the rack, and then you can do setup, and then you can progress into a sound check. So in terms of setup, if we work this way, we can choose bank and channel. This is the Sennheiser presets, which are intermodulation free if you have control of all the factors, i.e. no one else is switching on radio mic gear, and provided you stay within the same bank. So any of these channels within bank 11 will be intermodulation free. Shows you what the actual frequency is that is programmed into that bank. A squelch control is like a sort of gate, really. If it's an RF gate, in a sense that if there is no signal, AF signal happening on the microphone right now, then it will shut down the RF in so much as you won't hear background radio noise when there's no speech. So that can be quite useful when you have got a radio mic that's on the edge of its coverage. We can do AF out, so we could change this to +21, for example, and get some more level out of the RX. That would be the audio connection, the XLR going into your desk. Equalization, basic equalization on this range of RX. We can do some muting. So pilot tone will leave active. We're not going into that right now because we're going to keep this video introductory. Locking mode, and these warnings as well that we can show. So actually quite a lot of setup that you can do here, and if you've done setup on a Sennheiser, particularly the handheld transmitters, you know, it's quite fiddly with the little dial that you've got at the bottom of the transmitter. So actually using the software is quite swift in comparison. And especially, here's the great news, of course, we've only got a few pieces of RF gear hooked up right now, but you could hook up a lot. I mean, the biggest productions I've done have involved about 24 or so channels in WSM, and managing all that stuff from this software is really, really convenient. So what's selected goes blue, so I'm currently selecting that. I'm going to select on this, and maybe I could do some frequency preset in here. So if the first one was on 11.10, then I'm not going to choose 11.10, but 11.3 will do on this one, and I could give it a name, and off I go to do my setup. So this would be before my sound check. Note a few things here. RF mute means that there's nothing switched on and tuned to that frequency. There's only this mic in play for this demonstration, the one I'm talking into. And also these gold looking ones are your IEMs, which at the moment, just checking, aren't switched on and aren't in use for this demonstration. Another thing to note is if you ever try and double click on a device and you can't edit, you can edit in this case because it says remote active. But sometimes it'll say remote inactive, and that's because under system, remote access is not enabled. So it's kind of a way of like locking the person on the software out of making changes. So you can still see the metering, but you can't make changes. Double click on this, and it says remote inactive, and I can't make changes. But if I go here and click remote access, I can make changes. So that's one way of using this software. It's opening the configuration file and going from there, making some changes from there, and then during the show I would encourage you deny remote access, and then you can do your metering from there. Now another way of using this software is to set up from scratch, and one way you could do that is go to Frequency Manager and either choose Easy Setup or Professional Setup. Right now I'm just going to go Easy Setup. I'm going to choose wireless microphone system because this is a handheld radio mic. And then this is asking me which of the receivers do I want to work on. Well, RX1 first. Remote access is not active. Do you wish to activate it? Yes, I do. So now we come to a scan. Now this is like the easy setup menu that you get on the actual hardware, the devices themselves. Excuse me. So we're going to go preset scan. Yep. Scanning is in process. So similar to the easy setup that you can do on the hardware itself, you can only do easy setup on the receiver, by the way. So that would be the receiver in the rack, or for in-ears it would be the receiver, the belt pack receiver. After you've done a preset scan, it shows you what's available. So in Bank 11 we've got 14 out of 15 frequencies unused. The one frequency that is used is the one that this radio mic is currently transmitting on. I'm going to click next. So in this menu we can allocate the channels within Bank 11, these preset channels, which these are the actual frequencies that the channels are, these are just presets from Sennheiser. We can apply them to a transmitter by dragging and drop them onto the receiver. There's 3 receivers currently connected as part of this network. And we can click allocate automatically and it'll sort it out for us. Then you're going to click finish. Now I'm not going to click finish because otherwise this mic that's currently talking into the camera might stop working. But after you've clicked finished, that would be job done in terms of setting up frequencies for the receivers that you've got connected as part of the network, and that's going from scratch as opposed to opening the configuration file. Usually, if you just open for operational use, open the configuration file on the desktop and then off you go. For learning purposes, if you want to do it totally from scratch so you know the software well, then Frequency Manager and Easy Setup is a good place to start. There is another setup option, which is to go Frequency Manager and do Professional Setup, but we'll save that for another video. One more thing that I will show you on this video though is if you go to Applications and Spectrum Analyzer, you can do a scan. So you pick a receiver, that is the physical receiver in the rack, which one you're going to use to do this scan. And if we choose range, this is going to scan the whole range of this receiver, which is 606 through to 648 in the case of this particular receiver. And then we hit record. Now, this is going to stop this microphone working because while it does the scan, it's going to take the microphone out. But I'm going to press yes and just leave the camera rolling. And the microphone's back. So we were told, surprised to find that there was one frequency occupied. That's this microphone that is currently switched on. So this scan is really useful, but it's a within operational range scan. So sometimes if you want to scan a bit below and a bit above the operational range of your equipment, then getting another scanner would be the way to go. And for example, you might want to have a look at a device called RF Explorer because that's a highly regarded professional piece of equipment that a lot of RF techs use.